So, Clarky, what's one belief that you had in your 30s that probably makes you laugh now?
The belief I had in my 30s?
Yeah.
Well,
Is there anything that you thought, yeah, this is it, and now you look back on it and go, oh, for goodness sake?
yeah. Well, I think we've probably been, we've all been shot down in flames from time to time. Professionally, things have gone pretty well for me, and I've never had any major faux pas. I haven't dropped any F-bombs or whatever.
Haven't you? Not one?
Not on air.
Not
on air.
Not on air.
I probably felt
Wow,
like it at
well
times, but I
done.
haven't done it.
Paint the picture. Where were you living? What were you doing day to day? And just explain for our audience what you were maybe quietly worried about at that time.
Okay, well, I think I should preface it by saying that I was working in radio in Queensland, and I wanted to be a race caller. And the radio station I was working at, 4KQ in Brisbane, was sold.
So, Greg, do you think people in their 30s today, are under more pressure or just a different pressure?
No, they're definitely under more pressure. We're all trying to help our kids out as much as possible. But, when I talk to my kids who are both in their 30s now and talk to their friends, it is tough.
Welcome to What I Wish I Knew at 30. What if the things you're struggling with right now are actually setting you up for the life you'll be proud of in 10 years' time? The podcast where we strip back the highlight reel and talk honestly about the moments that shaped us, the doubts, the detours, the breakdowns, and the breakthroughs that often followed. If you're someone who's building a career, a business, or a life, and sometimes wondering if you're doing it right, you're in the right place. Before we dive in, make sure you hit subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. Every week, I will bring you real conversations with people who've lived a lot of life, and they're ready to share what they wish they'd known sooner. So my guest this week is no different. My guest today is from the sporting arena and one of the Southern Hemisphere's most loved sporting commentators. Today's conversation will be a powerful one, I have no doubt. My guest is Greg Clark, affectionately known as Clarky, a Fox Sports commentator known widely for his rugby coverage. And I know we're going to hear a lot more of other sports that Clarky's been involved with. And he's going to share with us maybe the hard-learned and not so hard-learned lessons in the world of media and life, and lessons that shaped who he is today. Clarky, welcome to What I Wish I Knew at 30. Thank you so much for joining me.
Fran, it is a pleasure, and thank you for having the confidence in me that I will remember when I was 30.
Well, if I can, you can. I love that. So how are you? Tell us a bit about how you started in media and what you're doing with yourself today.
Okay, well, I'm talking from the Gold Coast at the moment, which is my base. I'm Queensland born and bred, 25 years in Sydney at Fox Sports. Been on the Gold Coast now for coming up to 5 years. As a kid, 10-year-old, 11, 12, I used to pick up the best bets and do phantom race calls. And when young people call me and say, I want to be a commentator, how do I start? I said, well, the first thing you really got to have is the gift of the gab, I call it, the commentary gene. So obviously at a young age, I had this ability to racing this time on the outside at such and such, such and such. And then one day I was at a country race meeting in Western Queensland and the race caller didn't turn up. And they put the word out, can someone call the races? And as a 13-year-old kid, I put my hand up and said, yeah, I'll do it.
Oh, wow.
And that was the start. I dread to think what it sounded like. I don't have a recording of it, but squeaky voiced little 13-year-old calling the races. And at that stage, I wanted to be a race caller. Now, I look back on it now. I've called over 200 rugby test matches. This is my 26th season of Super Rugby Pacific. I'll be calling the Drua home games in Fiji again, starting in a very short time. Wow. And then, I've called a Rugby League World Cup. I've called NRL. I called the only Super League rugby league grand final between Brisbane and Cronulla. Remember Super League back in
Yeah, yeah.
1997? I called that game. I've called Commonwealth Games, Olympic Games, Winter Olympic Games, Australian Open tennis, the America's Cup. Not bad for a kid from Western Queensland. We never saw water, let alone the ocean or boats. And I ended up in San Diego calling the America's Cup. And I've called lots of other things as well along the way. So from a squeaky voiced 13-year-old kid who put his hand up to call a race meeting in Longreach, Queensland, to now, I've got no regrets, and I just feel that I've been very lucky. Mind you, there's a lot of hard work in there and some hard knocks along the way. But yeah, so in summary, that's basically where I'm at and where I've come from.
Amazing. So let's rewind the clock, Greg. Let's go back to when you were 30. And we've established that you can remember back that far. So that's a good thing. Paint the picture. Where were you living? What were you doing day to day? And just explain for our audience what you were maybe quietly worried about at that time.
Okay, well, I think I should preface it by saying that um, I was working in radio in Queensland, and I wanted to be a race caller. And the radio station I was working at, 4KQ in Brisbane, was sold, and they changed to a music format. And I stayed on because I'd been working in radio stations throughout the country,
Well,
areas, and I was a DJ, an announcer, as they call, so they used to call us. Um, and then my friends were going overseas, and I was very I think maybe 21, could have been 20, and I thought I'll go away for a month, and I stayed 2.5 years. Based in London. Did the combi van trip around Europe for 6 months. So while I worked in pubs, I was a manager of the London Walkabout Club. Some of your
oh, okay. Yeah,
listeners
yeah.
and viewers might remember that. Um, but I also was also doing some freelance journalism, which basically gave me a media pass to get to Wimbledon and to Wembley for rugby league and Twickenham for rugby and so on. Met a lovely lady from New Zealand who's still my wife. She came back to Brisbane with me for 3 years, but I just couldn't settle into the sports job that I wanted. I was doing a bit of part-time stuff on weekends, but I was just basically doing a music shift. And she said, "Why not pop over to New Zealand and give it a crack for a year or so?" So I sent off the cassettes as you did back in the day, and I got given the job. And eventually, we moved to New Zealand, and I stayed a decade there. So I had my
Oh, yeah.
30th birthday in New Zealand, and in the back of my mind, is this the right thing or the right place to be? But then, as every year went on, in my early 30s, I became more successful. Doors opened up. I went from radio into television. I did both at the same time for a few years. But yeah, I think in the back of my mind, I knew I'd always want to go back to Australia because that's
Mm.
where I started the dream, and that's eventually what happened. But yeah, I wasn't, full of confidence that New Zealand was the place to be. And of course, coming from Queensland, I had the Aussie accent. I had to soften that. I used to say chance and dance and all that sort of stuff, and then I had to speak like a Kiwi and chance and dance and example and all that stuff rather than example, and then the Maori names, Polynesian names, and
Mm.
yeah, so that was a bit of a bit of a struggle for me, but I took on the challenge and had a very successful stint there. Fox Sports started, and they gave me a call and said, "We want you to come over and call." Whatever rugby we had, but come over and call NRL. And I was a presenter at that stage as well. And, I had a wonderful 25 years at Fox Sports. But back on my 30th birthday, I probably wasn't as confident as I am nowadays, knowing what
Yeah.
I've managed to achieve.
So you think you were still winging it at that point?
Pretty much winging it, yeah. Calling whatever opportunity. I put my hand up if the radio station needed someone to cover this event. I'd be there. I was sports editor at Radio Pacific, which is still to this day a talkback network with racing. And so I was working full time sport, and had an opportunity to really broaden the base, and cover netball, cover hockey, cover soccer, and league, and I was there for the start of the Auckland Warriors, and because of my Queensland background, my rugby league knowledge, I was calling the Warriors back in the early days as well, and they're still around, aren't they? Well, they're the New Zealand Warriors now
Mm.
rather than Auckland Warriors. So that was a big stepping stone for me to get into to get into the Warriors and the NRL as it is nowadays. And while the public really didn't know I was an Aussie because I didn't talk like an Aussie, my bosses knew
Yeah.
that I was, and I didn't do a lot of rugby commentary while I was in New Zealand because I'm an Aussie. But I did a
Yeah.
lot of presenting, and I had a magazine show called Moro Sports Extra, and I read the sports news on the 6 o'clock news Monday to Friday. So yeah, doors kept opening, but at 30, I wasn't quite sure what was going to happen.
Yeah. So you obviously took the opportunities as they came up, and really just always had your hand up to say yes.
Yeah. And I think that's the advice I give other people. You've got to have a bit of X factor. You've got to do the homework. You can't
Mm,
wing it forever. But
mm.
yeah, I just knew that if I was going to, win the battle, I'd have to do the hard work and make sure that I walked through those doors when they opened.
Yeah, absolutely. And that sounded really sage advice. So what did success mean to you at 30? I mean, you know, did you have a vision? Did you know where you were going? Or, sort of was success something that just sort of gradually came up on you? Or did you have a real vision about, this is what I want?
Well, in the back of my mind, as I said, I think I knew from whenever I was able to pick up a best bets.
Mm,
As a 10-year-old that I wanted to be a broadcaster, a commentator. But at 30, uh, I had a mortgage. Um, I was trying to pick up some extra dollars,
yeah.
doing some MC work, and fortunately, I'm still doing a lot of that as well. Um, and yeah, we just had to, knuckle down and make
Mm,
sure that I worked hard. I was getting up at 4:30 every morning, not 5 days a week, 6 days a week, because on Saturday
mm,
morning it's a big sports day, and I had to do a sports show. So my lifestyle was, you know, um, up early,
pretty
and
hectic.
yeah, and then kids came along, and that made life a lot harder as well because I was still getting up at 4 or 4:30 in the morning. So, um, I say to people nowadays, you've got to put in the hard yards. You can't be frightened of hard work,
Mm,
and you've got to have an understanding partner
yeah.
that knows that you're doing your best to stay afloat. Um, but yeah, it was sort of it could have gone any way. I was fortunate. I worked at a radio station that was a sports station. I got into television, and I was doing sport. And all through my career at Fox Sports, we had the rugby rights and the rugby league rights the rugby rights for 25 years. I mean,
Mm,
they could have disappeared after 5 years, and I would have had to go off and start again somewhere. But I had that wonderful run there. So I've had luck on my side. That
mm.
sometimes I think that maybe I created my own luck along the way as well.
It sounds like you did. It sounds like you took the opportunities of actually having that broad repertoire, which meant you could pull on that, and also producers could pull on that when they wanted someone to come in and do something. You were there.
Had no idea about it, but I was the anchor, and really, you should be if you're a broadcaster, you should be able to call anything, providing you've got an expert there.
Yeah.
Anyway, they said, "Well, we'll give you an expert," because the expert froze. And so I'm thinking this is going to be interesting. So I had to slowly but surely start getting some information out of the expert sitting there. So, maybe
Mm,
I don't think I put my hand up for lawn bowls after that, because while I can keep score and everything, it's not the sort of sport where you can scream and shout, "Oh, what a bowl!" It's sort of Yeah.
Well, maybe
So
you can, but it wouldn't quite create the rapport that
that's
you
true.
maybe need to call it.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
just going back to when you were 30, what's something you were absolutely certain about at 30 that you now realise you probably had completely wrong?
Well, not quite sure how to answer that because, as I said, it was sort of, I was in another country. It is, are the doors going to keep opening?
Mm,
Somewhere along the line, am I going to hit a roadblock where they're saying, well, actually, you're not a Kiwi, you're an Aussie, and maybe it's time to sort of, go home. So I think in the back of my mind, I was sort of just saying yes to everything, doing everything possible to learn from the people around me, to remain positive. But in the back of my mind, it could have gone belly up at any stage. And the reason I left New Zealand probably in the end was because Fox Sports started, and and I was working for Television New Zealand, and they had lost the rights to the NRL, to rugby league, and I was really enjoying commentating the Warriors and being involved in the magazine shows covering all sorts of sports. But
mm,
at the time, they lost the rights, and that's when Fox Sports gave me a call, and the rest is history. So uh, for a long time there, I was becoming more and more, comfortable being in New
mm,
Zealand and doing what I did because as every year would go by, I was earning more money, more doors were opening up, and the family was up and running, and we were living a pretty good life for a 30-something-year-old. So,
yeah.
yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's
Well,
basically what I can remember at the time.
yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because, sort of, it sounds, and we spoke a little bit about this before, that there weren't actually any, like, there's no hard luck story here. There's no, like, time when you felt like everything was falling apart, or was there?
Any advice I was given was always, I think, good advice. I mean, I've had some shocking tips on the punt, um, and in the investment world. I wish I had have put some money into real estate there and not into the share market, 6 months before a crash and things like that.
Yeah,
So yeah, so I've had bad advice along the way and that sort of thing. But if you're talking about my career, it was always good advice. I was told very early on to basically be a good listener, never
mm,
burn bridges. You just never know. Where you end up or where a boss who you didn't get on well with, he might go elsewhere, but then eventually come back to where he was, where you were or where you are. Um, so don't burn bridges. Take good advice.
right,
Learn from the experienced people. And as a kid, when I was wanting to be a race caller, I wrote to the great Ray Warren, Rabbits Warren, the voice of rugby league in Australia for all those years, and swimming at the Olympic and Commonwealth Games. And Ray was a race caller at that time, and I wrote to him as this kid, and I don't know whatever happened to the letter. I know my mother had it somewhere stashed away. He basically gave some very good advice. He replied to me and said, speak the Queen's English. Remember, when you're calling for the punter. So if a horse is 3 lengths from the lead, he's three lengths from the lead. Just make sure that you're accurate, um,
mm,
and and things like that stuck in my mind. And then also, you work with people like Keith Quinn, who's a great New Zealand broadcaster, retired now. But Quinny gave me some very sound advice along the way as well, in particular with pronunciation. He said, if someone's got a name, they deserve to have that name pronounced correctly. And when you think about rugby league, and
mm.
the Polynesian names, I'm doing it
There's
now
some names.
with the Fijian names. If someone's got a name, you do your utmost research to try and make sure you get it right. So little things like that may not sound a lot, but you
Mm,
lock those away. And then there are little things you do in broadcasting where if a match is one-sided, you don't tell people to turn off and go and watch Netflix or go and watch Fran Harper. You tell them to,
You can though, if you like.
yeah, you tell them to stay with it, and you start, saying why this team is dominating, why are they so good. So people have just given me little tips along the way that I've stored in the back of my mind. I've become a bit stoic later in life, and I'm not interested in negatives. I'm only interested in positives, and I try to surround myself with positive people. And at Fox Sports, for example, I've worked with high achievers. You talk about George Gregan commentating alongside George, Phil Kearns, uh, Wallaby captain,
Mm,
Greg Martin over the years, Nathan Sharp, another Centurion, Test
mm,
Centurion, and then you Rod Kafer, who was one of the best rugby brains that
yeah,
I've met. Rod should have played more Test matches, but he was behind some very big names at one stage, and then he had injury issues as well. But just to see how those guys went about their life, their career, and I just milk it. Having
yeah.
a glass of red after a game one night, I'd just be listening and taking
Mm.
it all in, because these guys are high achievers, and I think that's a good thing to surround yourself with, high achievement.
100%. And what do you think were the collaborative skills or the skills that each and every one of those people that you mentioned, what were the things that shone that actually made them the high achievers that they are?
No doubt,
Yes.
no doubt about that. Professionalism. You
Mm,
talk about George Gregan, the stare. George didn't have to say a lot. You could tell by the stare if you were his teammate, whether or not you'd stuffed up or not. But yeah, professionalism, um,
mm,
and dedication. The preparation also comes into it as well. Uh, and you had to be a team player as well. I know some of them are great individuals as far as
mm,
sporting achievements go, but they did it with the help of their teammates as well. So I was always very, very happy to maybe not take the back seat completely, but be,
mm,
be, part, be part of the team. And if I'm sitting in a commentary box and I've got George Gregan or I've got Phil Kearns or Nathan Sharp alongside me, um, you know, I'm going to try and get the best of their knowledge out of them. I'm not going to try and tell the viewers what's actually happening. I can call the play-by-play, but when it comes to a technical aspect or something, I'm going to try and get it out of the experts. So that's what I mean by being a team player, being a good
mm.
listener, and I prided myself over the years on being able to extract a lot of good stuff out of people. But to this day now, Phil Kearns has just finished as the CEO of AB Jennings,
Yeah.
because it's been purchased, and I'm sure he's going to have another big role in business. He's already on the board of Rugby World Cup, the organising board. George Gregan continues to kick goals in the business sector, as does Rod Cafe and Nathan Sharp. So these
Mm,
guys have been able to, you know, set a high standard for themselves in the sporting world, but then transition across into
yeah.
into the business world as well. And I'm so pleased that I had the opportunity to work with these guys and just you know not quite follow in their footsteps, but take their advice soundly and put it into my own world.
Absolutely, and I think you're right. It's that dedication. It's that dedication to whatever craft or skill that you're working on or doing, and having you know doing the work, doing the preparation, and not making excuses about it. And I mean, I suppose when you're calling a game, it's you can't. You've got to know what's going on. Yeah, sure.
I have some folders here. You may not be able to read them, but this is the Fijian Drua versus the Western Force.
Oh, brilliant!
You know,
That's your
so
bet.
so a mate of mine's a print broker, and I used to write all these folders out myself. And he said, "No, I'll do it for you." So 1 to 15, and then 16 to 23
Yeah.
at the bottom. I'm old school. I write them down. The names I write them phonetically because it's a lot easier to pronounce Fijian
Yeah.
names when you do it phonetically, like Bode Bode, Voce is not pronounced Vok Vok, it's Bode Bode, Silla Silla, Thanga Kaibata, and Samu Vodra, Longanamasi. So I love it when the
Yeah.
two teams are announced and I can write it down, and
Yeah.
then I start. This is my artwork for every match, and on the back I've got notes. Normally, I don't fit them all on there.
Yeah.
I then have to have my notepad. But so from Wednesday, write the team down, and then I'm happy. I'm
You're on
away.
it. You
I'm
know what
gearing
it's
up for the
like.
game on Saturday, researching, reading, talking to people, and just trying to find the little bullet points that I can get into the game. Now, sometimes in a game of rugby, if you use all your stats, it's a pretty ordinary game because it just means that
Yeah.
there's a lot of stoppages. So a lot of the stuff I research, I never get to use.
Yeah.
And you don't want to force it in there for the sake of forcing it in because you want to stay with the game. You've got, the game will dictate how many stats you manage to get in. So that's the way that I prepare it, and I always have done, and I'll continue to do so while I'm still doing what I do.
And it's still there. Absolutely. Now, if you could sit across from yourself, looking back at being 30, and you could sit across from the table, what are the three things that you would want your 30-year-old self to truly understand? Not just hear, but to actually truly understand?
Well, I think the first thing, if we're talking career,
Or life. Or
oh
life.
yeah, life. Well, yeah, exactly. Um, I'd be saying to myself, stick to your principles, stick
Mm,
to your guns. You've got this far. You're married, and you managed to get your first house. You've His family hasn't quite started yet, but the plans are there. So you've got to have a runway ahead of you.
mm,
So make sure that runway doesn't have preferably any obstacles, but not too many obstacles along the way. So that means make sure you're prepared to put in the hard yards
mm,
and make the most of the opportunities. Um, the rest of it, um, I don't think I'd have any different advice to my 30-year-old self if I was looking across at me back then. I think I was doing what I thought was the right thing to do, the right path to be on. Um, if I had have stayed in Brisbane, um, would opportunities open up would they have opened up for me there? Um, I just said, yeah, basically stick to the runway. I don't know if there was sort of two or three things I could say to myself because I look back now and everything sort of turned out the way I pretty much wanted it to
mm,
turn out. So, yeah, it was more about just, I think, hard work. And I pride myself um, on trying to be a good bloke, a good person. Um, and I'm sure somewhere along the line, someone's hasn't been happy with something I've said in commentary or whatever else. But I don't like confrontation.
mm,
I figure there's got to be a way to sort an issue out rather than
yeah.
screaming and shouting, etc. So I'm a lover, not a fighter, I guess. And yeah, my advice would be to you know be the best person you can be, and if we all do that, it'll be a better world. Yeah,
Wouldn't it just? Wouldn't it just? If we all really kind of dedicated time to learning how to communicate. And communication, of course, has been the pinnacle of your life and what you do.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And my wife nowadays, and my friends nowadays, get sick of me because if you go for a walk or go for a drink or a meal, I've got a tendency to talk to people.
Well,
communicate,
I
communicate. And
may
they say,
have that
can
same
we not just move
tendency.
on? We're not, we're running late, or the meal's about to be served, and you're over there talking to someone about rugby or whatever. So,
We're
yeah,
we're we're
once
both
a communicator, always a communicator.
exactly, and we're both definitely in the extrovert world. I have friends in my life who are introverted who actually say to me, "We're going for a walk. Can we please not make a million new friends on the way,
Exactly.
on the way up the beach?" And it's like, "Mm, okay then." As you say, if you're a communicator, you're a communicator. There's nothing you can do about that. It serves us in what we do. So, Greg, do you think people in their 30s today, are under more pressure or just a different pressure?
No, they're definitely under more pressure. Yeah, you just look at real estate. I really feel for young people
Mm,
trying to get into their first property, into their first home. It's tough out there.
yeah.
Even if you've got a reasonable job, it's uh, I'd love to be a better bank of mum and dad. Um, so I think we're all trying to help our kids out as
Mm,
much as possible. But when I talk to my kids who are both in their 30s now, and talk to their friends, it is tough. Where
mm,
I don't recall it being that tough for me. I sort of had at one stage I was doing radio and television in my early 30s, um, and I was doing MC work. So I've always sort of had extra work along
mm.
the way. But to me, it wasn't really work. It was,
No,
I was doing something that I love.
communicating.
Yeah, communicating and doing something that I love, and I'm going to sporting events, and
Yeah.
if I'm not commentating or presenting, um, I'm emceeing a corporate function with good people and good guests to interview, and there's a good
Mm,
vibe all the way through. So I just know a lot of young people don't get that opportunity nowadays, and yeah, it's definitely tougher for 30-year-olds now, and in the media as well. It's a very competitive
mm,
industry, whether you're talking radio or television, and I was just lucky along the way that the right doors opened at the right time, and the network, whether it was radio or television that I was working for, had the rights to the sport that I was involved in, like rugby union at Fox Sports. I had it for
mm.
25 years. Um, so, you've got to be lucky along the way. And I've got people now calling me saying, I want to be a commentator. And there's a few more opportunities now with Stan Sport, because they do Sydney rugby competition, the Shoot Shield Titian,
Yeah.
Brisbane, the Hospital Cup. Um, and the commentator on every game now. So yeah, maybe they're not big blockbuster games, but
Yeah.
back in the day, there was Gordon Bray, the great Gordon Bray, who was there
Yeah.
on his
Oh,
own.
wow.
And then
Yeah.
I came into the scene when Gordy was at free to air, and he was only doing the test matches, and I was doing not only the test matches on Fox on subscription TV, but I was doing all of the Super Rugby. So if anyone else was trying to get a foot in the door there were limited opportunities.
Yeah.
Basically, there were no opportunities. Now,
Mm,
at least there is an opportunity for someone to go and call a game of sport. And in
mm.
Melbourne, they might do Powerhouse and Harlequins or something. There's
They've got
streaming.
callers.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
streaming. And
Yeah.
so if you've got some ability, hopefully
Mm.
you can do that. And be noticed and down the track. But it was very hard for anyone to break in, because I was at Fox and Gordon was at 7 or 10,
Yeah.
and that was it basically.
Yeah, and yeah, that's absolutely right now. Anyone can stand on the sidelines now and stream,
Mm.
and they do. And some of them are really quite good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So,
but back in the day, I'm sure there were still some very good commentators around,
mm,
but they just didn't get the opportunity. And I came through an era where I worked at 4LG Longreach, 4VL Charleville, 4WK Toowoomba, and then 4KQ in Brisbane. But pretty much every decent sized country town in Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, and South Australia, wherever, WA, Tasmania, let's not forget about them,
mhm,
or the Northern Territory. But any decent sized town had a radio station,
yeah,
and you called the races, or you had an opportunity to call the rugby league or whatever, AFL or whatever the sport was. Nowadays, it's all syndicated.
yeah,
So again, there are limited opportunities for a kid like myself,
Yeah.
late teens, 20-year-old, I was working on radio stations, doing a 4-hour music shift, writing my own commercials, producing my own and voicing my own commercials, and doing some news reports and calling races, calling rugby league, calling whatever. Um, but yeah, that doesn't happen nowadays.
No. I mean, going back to when you were 30, I mean, you've as you said earlier, I mean, you've made your own luck. You've worked hard. You've taken the opportunities as they come along. But what's the best advice you've ever received? Somebody that actually gave you advice, and were you ready to hear it at the time?
Yeah, I mentioned Ray Warren
Mm.
earlier on, so that was very early on, and it's something he probably told 1,000 people that wrote to him looking for advice. But so we start there, and then I had the opportunity to work with Alan Thomas, who was a great race
Oh,
caller,
right.
called races forever in Brisbane. Now lives on the Gold Coast, and I see him every second day. But Alan was just a professional. He lived and
Mm,
breathed the whole thing. Um, at one stage, when I went to England, I sort of dropped the horse racing thing, because with horse racing, you need to live it, eat it, breathe it.
mm.
Nowadays, it's 7 days a week, and
Oh,
I,
yeah.
I admire
Oh, it's
ra-
huge,
ra-
isn't it? Here and
race
in the
callers.
UK.
They can just pick up,
Yeah.
they can turn up at Geelong one day and never seen a horse before, and call 7 or 8 races, and their memory is amazing, and their knowledge is amazing as well. So Alan taught me a lot back in the early days, and then from a rugby league point of view, I worked with Graham Hughes, who called rugby league on Channel 7 and Channel 10 for quite a long time, and he offered me a lot of advice. Keith Quinn, Grant Nisbet, they offered me a lot of advice. I would, if I had an opportunity to talk to Gordon Bray, I would, make sure I'd be asking questions, and taking, not quite taking physical notes, but mental notes there. But the advice that they all gave me was preparation.
Yeah.
That is the key. You must be prepared. You must do your research, because what you're trying to do is give viewers a little bit extra,
Mm,
and the only way to do that is to find out a lot about the people you're commentating, the team you're commentating, or the event that you're commentating. So research, research, research. And if you go into a game and you've done your research, well, you're more than halfway there. And that's why I say on a Wednesday, I write the two teams down, and from then on, before kickoff, I am absolutely satisfied that I've got everything I need. So yeah, that was it. But going over old ground that we've spoken about, you've got to be a team player, because behind the scenes, especially in television, you're relying on a director to give you the shots
mm,
that you need. You're relying on a producer that's going to give you the right advice throughout the game
mm,
to keep everything flying. You're relying on your co-commentators, the experts sitting beside you to be on. So in a way, you're sort of conducting an orchestra and making sure that everyone is on the same page. Now, back in the early days, we'd all do our own stats and keep books. They'll be rolled up like this. Nowadays, of course, there's a stats department, and there's just stats available everywhere online. So I used to work hand in hand with the Fox Sports stats people, because um, you know they were paid to come up with a few interesting stats that the viewers didn't know about, and I didn't have to count up every Super Rugby cap or every Test cap, because it was pretty much handed to me along the way. So that's the advice that I used to take on board. But the big thing that keeps coming out is the R word, and that's research.
Yeah, research and preparation. And I think you also said, sort of when you're commentating, when you're interviewing, getting the most out of the person that's with you. And we're going to go into the next part of this podcast now, which is the fun part. And I love this part. And it's really, just a few questions that are going to get just underneath that very polished exterior. And so, Greg, what's the worst advice you ever followed, and what did it cost you?
I was advised once to go to TV3 in New Zealand because there was a startup company, and Television New Zealand was the state broadcaster that had gone commercial. But they were seen as, maybe, and no disrespect to the ABC, but they were the national broadcaster. And the young upstarts came into town in New Zealand, TV3, and I had the choice to get into TV either
Yeah.
through TV3 or through TVNZ, where I'd been doing a little bit of part-time stuff. And the advice that some people gave me was to go to the startup. These guys are going to be amazing. Anyway, I did that, and it was the wrong decision. Not because of my performance, but because they just couldn't deliver what they'd promised me. They didn't have access to vision, to sports, and whatever. So we quickly became the poor cousin, and fortunately, Television New Zealand could see that it wasn't really happening for me at
Yeah.
TV3, and they got me back, and I had a very successful stint there. So that was one bit of advice that I followed, and it didn't work out. But fortunately, I turned things around.
Turned it around.
It,
It didn't cost you your career in the end of the
that
day.
didn't cost me my
Right.
career, and it was very high profile because there were billboards all over New Zealand.
Mm.
The new boys are in town, TV3, and one of my colleagues there was the late Stu Wilson, the great All Black, and he was so much fun to work with because he's a real character, and
Mm.
his personality was rated right around the world. But there were billboards everywhere, so at least by going there, I got a higher profile. So when I
Yeah,
did
yeah,
go back to Television New Zealand, I didn't have to sort of start afresh or whatever. So yeah, but that's sort of the only sort of bad turn
yeah.
that I've taken. But then again, Clarky being Clarky, I tried to get the positives out of that, and the positives were the fact that my profile was higher,
Yep.
and I had to eat a bit of humble pie, which I think a
Yeah.
lot of us have to eat from time to time to move on, and that's all part of being in that team environment.
Yeah.
You're not blame
It's not
yourself
always a bad
occasionally,
thing, is it?
yeah, rather than blaming others.
Yeah, 100%. So, Clarky, what's one belief that you had in your 30s that probably makes you laugh now?
The belief I had in my 30s,
Yeah.
well,
Is there anything that you thought, "Yep, this is it," and now you look back on it and go, "Oh, for goodness sake."
Yeah. Well, I think we've all been shot down in flames from time to time. Professionally, things have gone pretty well for me, and I've never had any major faux pas. I haven't dropped any f bombs or whatever
Haven't
on.
you? Not
No,
one?
not on air.
Not
Not on
one?
air.
Not on
I
air?
probably felt like
Wow,
it at
well
times, but I
done.
haven't done it. Um, so I haven't had too many embarrassing moments a lot like that. But every now and again, probably my wife would probably not have to work too hard on it, but she'd pull me in line occasionally, thinking that maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself because as the profile grows, um, it's not in me to try and push myself out there, but the network sometimes does.
Yeah.
At one stage I was doing uh, a magazine show with the former New Zealand netball great called April Uramia, and the two of us are on Women's Weekly, billboards, and the front
Oh,
front page of a cover or something. And at times, I guess it's hard not to get the old head wobble going.
yeah.
And so
Look
I'd
at
have
me.
to I'd have to sort of pull back a little bit now. And fortunately, mates of mine throughout the time have been able to pull me into line and whatever. So I've never really been um, able to get too far ahead of myself. But at times, I think back there at 30, when all of a sudden those doors started
Yeah,
opening and I got
yeah.
onto TV screens and whatever, I'd probably have to be pulled back into line a little bit.
I can't imagine that. You've always been just such a wonderful gentleman and so humble and in everything that I've seen. But yeah, I can maybe back then.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
difference between a 50, 60-year-old and to
yeah,
a 30-year-old is quite. And you needed to have you needed to have the X factor, didn't you?
yeah,
Like you had to.
yeah.
You couldn't
Had
push
to
that.
have something to get you there.
I've seen some young presenters, journos with a lot of ability just go in too hard, just push their case too hard, and some have even stepped on a few people along the
Mm,
way. I'd say, yes, you've got to have the X factor, you've got to have the belief, the confidence in yourself, but you have to be part of a team, and you just cannot afford
mm,
to get a reputation to being, uh,
yeah.
you name it. Yeah.
Yeah, and back to your point about, about living within your principles and, and keeping your values even, through fame and everything else. That's a really like strong lesson, isn't it?
Yeah, and the people that gave me advice throughout, we're all the same. I mentioned some of those great broadcasters that helped me out along the way, and that was them.
Mm,
They could they, they could talk to all sorts of people. You could be in an airport lounge, and they could talk to politicians or the
mm,
CEOs, chairman of the board. But then they could talk to the general public as well. And without fans,
yeah.
sports fans, there's no sport.
No, that's
Let's
right.
face it. So,
We
so
need them. They're a necessary evil.
yeah, and you've got to make sure that in the career that I've had, you're able to talk to the general fans.
Mm,
I just love at the moment going to Fiji and walking around
yeah,
the crowd in Lautoka and Suva. I mean, it's hot and sweaty, but you get out amongst the crowd, and they're there. The passion is amazing, and
yeah, it's
I'm
fabulous.
fortunate that I can actually go and chat to them and sit with them. Um, and that's a good trait to have, I think, and you've got to remember that, without fans, you've got
Yeah.
nothing really. Yeah,
No, I agree. And I think going back to that part and how important communication is, whether you're in sport or you're in business, being able to interact at all levels is a tremendous skill. When you can walk from the boardroom onto the street and or onto the terraces at rugby and be comfortable in those conversations and
yeah.
just being. I think that's a beautiful thing, and I'm really grateful that you talk to everybody because otherwise we wouldn't be talking.
Yeah. But you know what, Fran?
Yeah.
It sometimes amazes me that I can meet, the chairman of a board, I can meet a CEO, I can meet a politician, and they're more interested in my job.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in talking to them, but if they really, I know some of them have said, uh, "I'd prefer to have your job." So that also, makes me feel like I should be grateful for what I've had, because a lot of people would love to do the job that I've been able to do for all my life, pretty much.
Oh my goodness. When I finally retire, and I don't know when that will be because I don't think I ever will. But one of the things that I would love to do is to follow the whole of the HSB 7 series. And I've done most of them, but not all in the same season.
Yeah.
And just to actually go right the way around and do all of it. And I'm going to be on my podcast, and that's going to be, I loved it. And I know your boy played sevens too, didn't he?
Yeah, but he had a wonderful sevens career. I think he
Yeah.
played for Australia out of year 12 at
Mhm,
North
mhm,
Grammar in Sydney, and he went all the way through to the Olympics in Rio, and then he
mm,
went on to Super Rugby with the Waratahs, and one season with the Brumbies, and went over to the United States and captain
mm.
San Diego and the MLR. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Got to call him quite a few times. And you talk about the HSBC sevens. Um, I did the very first event
Did you?
when the World Series started. It was 19, 1999,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, it was Dubai. I'd come from the Rugby World Cup. Australia won it, of course,
Of
knocking
course.
over France
Yeah.
in that wonderful country Wales in Cardiff. Final was in Cardiff, and so I that was early in the month or mid-month, the middle of the month, and then a few weeks later, I'm in Dubai calling the sevens, and I call the sevens not the whole series because it used to clash with Super Rugby, but I could always do 3 or 4 events, and I'd
Mm.
work from 1999 to 2019 doing the sevens, and so
Wow.
I look back on it now when I see the sevens happening.
I think I should be there.
It's still going, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'd love sevens, and that also was. a great thing to do because it's fun.
Yeah. Well, it's so
When
much
you do a
fun.
test match and you do a Super Rugby game, and I know it's commentary's lightened up a little bit
Mm,
at the moment because of social media, and
yeah.
as soon as a try is scored, 2 minutes later it's already up on social media. But back in the day, it was pretty serious stuff.
Yeah.
But the sevens was light relief. That's when you
Yeah.
could really show a little bit more of your personality and come up with a few more one-liners and have some fun with the players and the names, etc. So yeah, Dubai, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. They were my four legs for
Mm.
20 odd years.
Yeah,
Uh,
amazing.
yeah,
Well, one of a very dear friend of mine, actually called on the ground at the Dubai Sevens. Dave Crane was on my. You must have met Dave.
yeah,
I interviewed Dave a few months ago on What I Wish I Knew at 30 because I met Dave at actually at a conference with Domino's, and he was emceeing a 4-day program that we were with, and he threw out into the. He said, "Oh, if anybody's looking for anyone to MC or anyone to motivate," were his exact words. And I collared him when he came out, and I said, "Listen, I'm bringing a young team over from Australia to play in the under 21s in the Dubai. I'd love you to come and talk to them." And he did. He came. He came to the hotel. He did a wonderful talk with them, and they went on to come second that year. In
fantastic.
Yeah, so it was great fun. But we've stayed great friends, and that's been amazing. So he's been on this podcast as well, which was great. So, Craig,
Everyone's been on the podcast.
I know everyone like we can, yeah, but because I'm a talker,
The
although I
communicator.
a communicator. I do try not to talk too much. I do try and let my guests get a word in edgeways. So, coming back to when you were 30, if your 30-year-old self had a theme song, what would it be and why? I'm going
First
to
thing
do
that comes to mind was Meatloaf. You took the words right out of my mouth. Um, yeah, I was a big Meatloaf fan around that time. Um, yeah, theme songs. Uh, I should have thought more about that, about that one.
I
But
think that's a great one.
yeah, but um, because I had that time as a radio announcer where I would call sport on weekends, but during the week I had to do a 4-hour radio show, whether it was breakfast or afternoons or drive time or nights. I managed to play a lot of music and um, so I have some favorite genres. We had to play country music in some of those country stations, one or two
Fantastic.
songs um, an hour, and there was all the top 40 stuff going on. So my music library is all over the place, um, and uh, yeah. You took the words right out of my mouth. That was sort of my theme song. That was the one that I remember, and that's just come back now. So obviously
I love that, and it
there's
and
always,
it fits, doesn't it? It
yeah,
fits. It fits the whole career of being a communicator. I really love
exactly,
that.
yeah.
So
So
what's one skill you were terrible at back when you were 30, but you think you've maybe mastered it now?
yeah, well, I've never really been a handyman. I remember my wife buying a new mirror. We'll get someone to put it up. No, it's just drill 4 holes. The drill holes are already there, and I get the electric drill and it
Oh.
I'd crack it and put paintings up and they'd be crooked or they'd fall down. And so I was just a terrible handyman. If a car broke down, I had no idea, no idea whatsoever. Um, but I've just persevered over the years now. And with I had 2 kids, so if I go to around their place, I've got a Phillips screwdriver and I'm always finding a screw that is a bit loose or the door's not quite closing correctly. So yeah, terrible handyman, and but have improved since then. Only through perseverance, which is um, gardening. I was hopeless at things would just die. But now, I hate plants. I hate to see a plant that's looking a bit brown. I'm out there caressing it, and I hate throwing pot plants out. If they've got a little bit of life
Up
left
and
in them,
down.
I'll persist and whatever. So yeah, I've become a bit more like that. Yeah,
A
I,
bit
I
more
pers-
nurturing.
yeah, I persevere with things better nowadays than I did when I was 30. Yeah,
That's fabulous. And if you could have lunch with any historical figure, who would it be?
no problem there. Nelson Mandela. I was in 1999. I was doing the World Series of Sevens, as we spoke about. Went to Dubai, and the next event was in Cape Town. And Keith Quinn and I were on the commentary team, and we went to breakfast at the hotel, the Holiday Inn in Cape Town, and there was a lot of movement going on, a lot of people, soldiers, police, and out in the car park we could see that they had the mirrors underneath the cars and whatever. So we said to the manager, who we got to know very quickly, "What's going on?"
Mm,
"Oh, well, just between you and I, uh, Mandela will be here to speak at a conference that's going on in the hotel." Oh, so if you just happen to be milling around the foyer at 10 o'clock or whatever, um, who knows? You might get a glimpse of him. Well, we got more than a glimpse of him, because when he walked past, we weren't allowed to take. You couldn't have a flashlight on your camera. But when he walked past, cheeky me, I said, "Mr. President, uh, you know, Red Clark, from Australia," and I said, any chance of a photo? And he came over, and he knew that Australia had won the World Cup,
Walk up.
only a matter of a month or so beforehand. And it wasn't a long conversation, but he remembered that. And then Keith Quinn popped in. He said, "Mr. President, Keith Quinn from New Zealand." He said, "Oh, bad luck, bad luck, bad luck," because they got bombed out. France knocked them out in the semi-finals. Um, and of course, he'd been there through that whole thing in '95 with the number six.
Mm,
The movie about him, didn't they? But the man had presence. He had something, an aura around him, and that was a simple 30-second
mm,
exchange. We waited. I had a coffee, and when he came back out, we had another photo with him and some of the others, because the word got around. But I remember phoning mates and my wife saying, "You're not going to believe it, but I've met Nelson Mandela." And throughout, I knew the story up until that point, but then after that, I followed it as well,
yeah,
and it was just quite amazing the effect he had on me,
yeah,
just by being in his presence. So I would have loved to have sat down and asked him. I went over to the island and saw
yeah.
his cell, and I went on a tour of Soweto and saw where his house was and his little
Mm,
room there. So I made a point of reading about him and checking out his history. So yeah, without a doubt, Mandela would be the one I'd love to sit down and have a chat to most
amazing.
of all. Yeah,
And they say, don't you? It's not, the things you remember aren't the things that are said, but it's the way that someone makes you feel.
yeah, yeah.
And
Um, I mean,
I
he
can
just got to
feel that.
he just got to brush past us, and
Yeah,
I would have been happy. But the
yeah,
fact that he was standing, across from me, and we had this very brief exchange. He just had this aura about him, this warmth, and I guess, um, yeah, that's why it's probably stuck in my mind. I have a
yeah.
photo of the two of us. It's faded a
Oh,
bit,
that's
so now I've got to
beautiful.
get a bit of I've got to get a little bit of help from a Photoshop to bring it back to life again. But yeah,
But worth doing. Obviously, a very memorable moment, and that that ability, or the fact that he actually bothered to,
exactly.
yeah, that's huge,
Yeah.
absolutely huge. If you were, I suppose, the next question is, what indulgence or guilty pleasure are you totally unapologetic about?
Well, just being me and having a good time. You know, I've been lucky to travel the world, the rugby world,
Hmm.
and meet some wonderful people, and anyone that's been to a World Cup or been to a Bledisloe Cup or
Yeah.
anything knows that the rugby is a very social game.
Very
We
social.
couldn't partake before the game, but we could certainly get involved after the game and try and catch up with everyone. Um, yeah, I'm not. I'm me, and
Yeah.
so I'm not going to.
You're Clarky.
Yeah, I'm not going to change now, and
Right.
hopefully I don't have to change. But yeah, I don't have any bad traits that rub people up the wrong way that I'm
Right.
aware of. I'm sure I would be aware of them because I have mates that are
Oh.
pretty direct with me, and family who's very direct as well. So
Yeah.
no, I'm just happy to be me,
Mm.
and if people don't like it, well, I'm not going to apologise for it. That's the way it is, and that's the way it's hasn't always been like that. But for as long as I can remember, that's
Yeah.
been the way it is. Yeah.
I think that comes with age as well, doesn't it? It comes with, that inner confidence that, you no longer really care what anyone else thinks
No.
because, if they've got something better to do, they can go and do it because it's
Yeah.
actually, you're doing you, I'm doing me. And, um, hanging around with positive people means you're not in that situation where you're listening to somebody that is moaning about someone else. So I agree with you. Let them get on with it.
And Fran, I know you like your golf. If there's one thing in life that I haven't mastered that I'm very disappointed with is my golfing ability.
I've only had one lesson. That's
Oh,
it. I don't play golf.
righto. Well, I know you've had the lesson because you told me, but yeah, I just
Uh,
it's a game that I fall in and out of love with, and people want me to be better, expect me to be better because I can have a par, and then the next time I'll put it out onto the road, onto the freeway, off the tee, and it's just a
well,
game that I have no consistency with, and it gets me down occasionally because people think that I can be better,
that you
and
should
and
be
they
good
said,
at it.
and they know that throughout my and some of the guys that I play that I work with are great golfers,
Yeah.
um, and they just they know the work I put into my broadcasting, the work that I put into my research and preparation. They
You
just think
don't
that
put
I
it
should be
into
better.
your golf.
No, I don't put it into my golf because I have no idea. So that's one thing that I think is long gone. I don't think it's going to get any better. It's as good as it's going to get. But I do play because I've got time during the week,
Yeah.
and I love the camaraderie. I love the walk in the park, but sometimes I
Nice.
don't like the results. Yeah.
Well, I've actually, for the first time, I've just joined a women's introduction, and it's actually the first time I've played. And
Oh wow.
so I know Brian Furlong is very much into his golf, but it's not something I've actually done. But I've decided that this year is my golf year, so we'll see. We'll come back to that. But
Okay.
so Clarky, if someone's in the middle of their own messy chapter right now, what would you want them to hear most that could help from your experiences over the last X amount of years?
Yeah, well, I think you've got to surround yourself with people that are going to give you good advice, or at least not drag you down. There's a way out of everything. I
Uh,
believe. For me, the doors open because I was doing what was expected of me.
mm,
Now, I know some people get in a bit of a rut and are not doing what's expected of them, or they're not doing what they're capable of. But my advice has always just been to stick to the runway. There are going to be hurdles along the way, and the finish line is there at the end, and
yeah,
it's up to you to get there. And how do you get there? For me, it was always surrounding myself with good people, not letting the turkeys get you down, as the old saying would go, and try to remain positive. And if there are negatives in your life, just try and make sure that there are more pros than there are cons.
yeah,
So it sounds simple when you say it like that, but I got a lot out of advice from people telling me similar stuff. Just stick to the runway.
Mm.
Do what you do best, and it's not going to come easy at times. Some people have to manufacture themselves. They have to, do the research, do the hard yards, do
Mm.
the preparation, and practice as well. So I guess, and that's what I've done over the years as well. I've pretty much
Mm.
practiced what
Mm.
I've preached as well, because it was instilled in me early, and I've been able to be lucky enough to work with people that encourage me to do, or give me the encouragement to keep doing what I'm doing. So, no, hang in there. That's the best advice, and it's simple, but sometimes the simple things in life are the best things in life.
Absolutely. And there is no, it is about hard work. It is about there's no back doors in this life. It's, if you do the work, if you show up, if you do the best you can, you will always have people around you that will help you. Um, I think it's when you don't that, people get frustrated. It's a different thing.
And friend, I don't know anyone that's got a job that pays a lot of money. I don't know anyone that's got a lifestyle that is just there. They
Yeah.
don't really have to work too hard at it. You look at some of the great sports people. You look at you know whether it's a Djokovic at 38, 39 years of
Mm.
age, still making it through to a final of the Australian Open. You look at Alcaraz at 22. Um, yes, he's got the natural talent, but my
Yeah.
good, gets it easy.
Pure hard work and practice is always going to win over the people that have natural talent. I've
That's
seen
right.
so many people, so many kids, so many that incredible natural talent, but didn't have that determination, didn't have that dedication that they needed to actually, go the extra yards
Exactly.
and, go the extra yards, and you can really choose what you want to do in this world. The opportunities are out there, I believe.
Well, hopefully, folks, hopefully you've got something out of what we've chatted about today, and yeah, if I can ever be of any help to anyone, just let me know.
I love that. Keith, thank you for sharing your story so honestly. And to everyone listening, if this episode resonated, please share it with someone who's navigating their own turning points. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm Fran Harper. This is What I Wish I Knew at 30. And a massive thank you to my friend and amazing commentator, Clarky. Thanks,
And
Clarky.
go the Fijian Drua in Super Rugby
We
Pacific.
go to Drua. We support the Drua now. That's our. We were actually talking about coming over in a few weeks' time. So hopefully we'll see you over there.
Lanaka.